There is a particular kind of exhaustion that lives in the hearts of the deeply empathetic. They walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional temperature of everyone present. A friend's subtle sadness, a stranger's quiet anxiety, a family member's unspoken anger. Their nervous systems are finely attuned instruments, constantly picking up on the emotional signals of others, translating those signals into their own bodily experience. They feel what others feel. They absorb the pain around them as if it were their own. And while this capacity for empathy is often celebrated as a gift, a superpower, a measure of their humanity and compassion, there is a dark side that few speak about. The constant absorption of others' emotions leaves little room for their own. The endless giving depletes their reserves. The inability to distinguish between their feelings and those of others creates a profound confusion about who they actually are. And slowly, over time, the empathy that was meant to connect them to others becomes the very thing that isolates them, drowning them in a sea of emotions that are not entirely their own. Chapter 1. The gift that becomes a burden. The deeply empathetic person is often celebrated. They are the ones people turn to when they need to be heard. They listen without judgment. They sense what is not being said. They respond with genuine care and concern. They are the glue that holds relationships together. They make people feel seen and understood. The world needs these people. The world calls them compassionate, kind, sensitive, caring. These are the people who become teachers, therapists, nurses, social workers, those dedicated to caring for others. But there is a particular kind of exhaustion that accompanies this empathic capacity. It begins so subtly that the person may not even recognize it. A friend reaches out about their struggle, and the empathic person listens. Not only listens, but truly feels the pain being shared. The sorrow enters their own body. The anxiety synchronizes with their own nervous system. They leave the conversation carrying the weight of their friend's burden. This happens over and over. A co-worker's stress becomes their stress. A family member's sadness becomes their sadness. A stranger's pain in a movie or book penetrates their system as if the pain were their own. The empathic person absorbs so much emotional information from the world around them that they begin to lose track of what belongs to them and what belongs to others. The exhaustion is insidious because it accumulates silently. The person may not realize how much they are carrying until one day they notice they are depleted. Their reserves are empty. They have given so much of their emotional energy to others that there is nothing left for themselves. There is also often confusion about identity. The empathic person is so attuned to the emotions of others that they lose touch with their own preferences, desires, and needs. They may not know what they actually enjoy. They may not be able to identify what they need because they are so skilled at sensing and responding to what others need. Relationships, paradoxically, can become sources of isolation. Despite being deeply connected to others, the empathic person may feel profoundly alone. This is because while they give so much emotionally, they rarely receive. Others bring their pain to them but do not always reciprocate by asking how they are. The empathic person becomes the emotional container for everyone else but has no one to contain them. The expectations placed on empathic people are often unrealistic. They are expected to always be available, always understanding, always able to manage their own emotions so they can hold space for others. When they struggle, when they need support, they often encounter judgment rather than the understanding they so freely give. There is also a particular kind of guilt that empathic people experience. They feel guilty for having needs. They feel guilty for being tired. They feel guilty for setting boundaries. They feel guilty for not being able to fix the suffering of others. This guilt becomes another weight they carry, another emotion that is absorbed and internalized. Over time, the constant emotional absorption creates a state of hyperarousal. The person's nervous system is always on alert, always scanning the environment for emotional cues, always preparing to respond to the needs of others. This chronic activation of the threat detection system takes a toll. The body becomes tense, sleep becomes difficult. The person may experience physical symptoms, headaches, digestive issues, chronic pain, that have no clear physical cause. The empathic person may also begin to experience emotional numbness as a kind of defense. After years of absorbing others' emotions, the capacity to feel anything, even joy, may become dampened. It is as if the nervous system, overwhelmed by the constant input, begins to shut down. Chapter 2: The Roots of Exceptional Empathy. The capacity for deep empathy is not something a person chooses. It begins before conscious thought. Highly sensitive persons, those with what is called sensory processing sensitivity, SPS, are born with nervous systems that are more responsive to environmental and emotional stimuli. This heightened sensitivity is present from infancy. These children notice details others miss. They are attuned to subtle changes in their caregivers' moods. They are overwhelmed by loud noises and bright lights. They cry more easily. They require more rest to process the stimulation around them. But there is another component to exceptional empathy that develops through experience. Many deeply empathic people grew up in environments that required them to be emotionally hypervigilant. A parent with mental illness taught them to read the parent's mood to stay safe. A volatile home environment taught them that sensing tension before it erupted could help them prepare. They became emotional detectives, learning to pick up on the subtlest signals of distress in others. Some empathic people were placed in caregiver roles early. They had to look after younger siblings. They had to manage a parent's emotional needs. They were parentified, given adult responsibilities too early, and in the process learned that their role in relationships was to provide emotional support and care for others. The message was clear. Their value came from what they could provide emotionally to others. Cultural and family narratives also shape empathy. Many empathic people grew up hearing that being sensitive and caring was their most important quality. They were praised for being the peacekeeper, the helper, the one who could calm others down. This praise, while well-intentioned, became entangled with their sense of self. Being empathic became who they are, not just something they do. Gender plays a role too. Girls are especially socialized to be attuned to others' emotions, to manage family relationships, to prioritize others' needs. The empathic gifts are cultivated, celebrated, and expected. Trauma also shapes empathy. People who have experienced their own pain often develop profound compassion for the suffering of others. They understand pain. They do not want others to suffer as they have. This understanding becomes a source of their empathy, but also a source of their vulnerability. They are easily triggered by the pain of others because it echoes their own. What is important to understand is that this exceptional empathy developed for a reason. In early environments that were unpredictable, unsafe, or emotionally demanding, the ability to read others and respond to their needs was a survival mechanism. The person learned that by being attuned to others, by caring for others, by prioritizing others' needs, they could maintain safety and connection. But what once was adaptive becomes problematic when it continues into adulthood. The person is still using the survival mechanism that is no longer necessary. They are still scanning for danger in others' emotional states. They are still prioritizing others' needs above their own. They are still carrying the weight of others' emotions as if it is their responsibility to manage them. Chapter 3: The Neurobiology of Emotional Absorption. The brains of highly sensitive people are wired differently. Neuroimaging research reveals that highly sensitive individuals show greater activation in brain regions associated with emotional processing, social awareness, and attention to detail. Specifically, the mirror neuron system, a network of neurons that fire both when a person performs an action and when they observe someone else performing that action, shows elevated activation in highly sensitive people. These mirror neurons are the biological basis of empathy. They allow us to understand others by simulating their experiences in our own brain. In highly sensitive people, this system is more active, which means they literally experience what others are experiencing to a greater degree. This heightened mirror neuron activity creates what researchers call emotional contagion, the phenomenon of absorbing others' emotions as if they were one's own. A person's facial expression triggers mirror neurons, which activate the same muscles in the observer's face, which in turn trigger the same emotional state through what is called facial feedback. The insula, the brain region that processes internal bodily sensations and emotional awareness, shows heightened activation in highly sensitive people. This means that when they observe someone in pain, their own insular cortex activates as if they themselves are in pain. The somatosensory cortex, the area that processes tactile sensation, also shows greater activation. This creates what might be described as literally feeling another person's physical and emotional state in one's own body. The amygdala, the threat detection center, is hyper-responsive in highly sensitive people. This means that emotional information registers as more urgent and threatening. Negative emotions in particular trigger a stronger response. Importantly, negative emotions travel faster and stronger than positive emotions through the mirror neuron system. This means that a highly sensitive person is more quickly and powerfully affected by the sadness, anger, anxiety, and pain of others than by their joy and contentment. The default mode network, the set of brain regions involved in self-referential thinking, also shows altered function in highly sensitive people. This can create confusion about boundaries between self and other. The person's own sense of self can become blurred with the emotional states they are absorbing. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for emotion regulation and executive function, can become less active when highly sensitive people are exposed to emotional stimuli. This means their capacity to regulate the intense emotions they are absorbing is reduced. All of this happens at the neurobiological level, largely outside conscious control. The highly sensitive person is not choosing to absorb others' emotions. Their brain is automatically, involuntarily resonating with the emotional states of those around them. Chapter 4. The Paradox of Caring Too Much. The empathic person is caught in a contradiction that is difficult to articulate. They want to help. They care deeply about the well-being of others, but the constant effort to manage their own emotional state while remaining attuned to others is unsustainable. The guilt is particularly intense. The empathic person feels guilty for having boundaries. They feel guilty for needing rest. They feel guilty for not being able to solve others' problems. They feel guilty for sometimes not wanting to hear about others' pain. This guilt keeps them trapped in patterns of overgiving and under-receiving. There is also a fear of being seen as selfish or uncaring if they prioritize their own needs. So they continue to give even when empty. They continue to listen even when overwhelmed. They continue to carry others' burdens even though they're staggering under the weight. The confusion about whose emotions belong to whom is constant. The empathic person may absorb a friend's anxiety and spend the day feeling anxious without understanding why. They may internalize a family member's sadness and find themselves in tears without knowing what triggered it. Over time, they lose touch with what they actually feel versus what they are absorbing from others. There is also often a resistance to protecting themselves emotionally. To set boundaries feels like abandoning others. To step back from emotional engagement feels like being cold or uncaring. The empathic person has internalized the belief that their value comes from their availability, their willingness to carry others' pain. Some empathic people develop a kind of savior complex. They believe it is their responsibility to fix other people's pain. If they could just understand well enough, care enough, give enough, they could heal the suffering of those around them. This belief sets them up for inevitable failure and disappointment, because people's pain is not something that can be fixed by one person's empathy. The paradox is that despite being so connected to others, despite spending so much time and energy on relationships, the empathic person often feels deeply lonely. This is because their relationships are unbalanced. They are always the giver, rarely the receiver. Others come to them with their pain, but they have no one to come to with theirs. Chapter 5. The breaking point of burnout. For many empathic people, the breaking point comes not dramatically, but as a slow erosion. The person notices one day that they no longer feel joy. Things that used to bring pleasure now feel flat. They are going through the motions of caring, but no longer experiencing the warmth that once accompanied that care. Others experience the breaking point as physical illness. The body, kept in a state of constant stress and hyper-arousal from absorbing others' emotions, finally breaks down. Mysterious illnesses emerge, chronic pain develops. The immune system becomes dysregulated. Some experience the breaking point as cynicism. After years of caring deeply for people and feeling it was not reciprocated, they become bitter. They begin to judge people harshly. They withdraw from relationships. The turning point often involves recognizing that the empathy, rather than connecting them to others, has become a source of isolation. The person realizes that constantly absorbing others' emotions is not bringing them closer to others, but pushing them further apart. They are drowning, and no one has noticed. There is often shame at this breaking point. The empathic person feels they have failed to be strong enough to handle others' pain, failed to be helpful enough, failed to be the emotional rock they were supposed to be. But there is also sometimes relief. The realization that they cannot fix everyone's pain. The recognition that carrying others' emotions is destroying them. The understanding that they must change something about how they relate to empathy itself. Chapter 6. Recalibrating to compassion. Healing from empathy. Burnout requires a fundamental recalibration. The person must learn to distinguish between empathy and compassion, between feeling what others feel and caring about what others feel without being consumed by it. Empathy is feeling with. Compassion is caring for. When a person moves from empathy to compassion, the neural activation shifts. Instead of activating the same pain centers that are triggered by empathic distress, compassion activates brain regions associated with care, warmth, and positive emotion. Setting boundaries is essential. The empathic person must learn that protecting themselves emotionally is not selfish but necessary. They must learn to say no to emotional demands. They must learn to leave conversations when they are becoming depleted. They must learn to physically distance themselves from emotionally charged environments. Developing emotional regulation skills is crucial. Practices like mindfulness help the person observe their own emotional state without becoming fused with the emotions they are absorbing. Somatic practices help them reconnect with their body and recognize when they are becoming overwhelmed. Self-compassion is perhaps the most important healing tool. The empathic person must learn to extend to themselves the same care they so freely offer others. They must learn to acknowledge their own suffering, to comfort themselves, to recognize that they deserve support. Building relationships with reciprocal emotional support is also necessary. The empathic person must learn to ask for help, to share their own struggles, to allow others to care for them. This requires tremendous vulnerability, but is essential for healing. Chapter 7. The integration of wholeness. On the other side of empathy, burnout is a new understanding of what empathy can be when it is balanced with healthy boundaries and self-care. The person discovers that they can remain caring without being consumed. They can connect with others' pain without absorbing it entirely. They can offer compassion without losing themselves. This is not about becoming less sensitive or less caring. It is about becoming more whole. The person can now engage with others from a place of strength rather than depletion. They can give from fullness rather than emptiness. The relationships transform. Instead of being one-directional, the empathic person always giving, always listening, always caring, they become reciprocal. Others begin to show up for them. They are no longer drowning alone. Most importantly, the empathic person begins to understand that their sensitivity is not a burden but a gift, not because they should use it to fix everyone's pain, but because it allows them to see and understand others in profound ways. When properly balanced and protected, this sensitivity becomes a source of wisdom, compassion, and authentic connection.